Hi and welcome to an Elite Gaming Raid Guide. In this raid guide we'll be covering the tactics for the first boss of the new Denova operation, Zorn Toth in 8-man story mode. First thing is, you require 2 tanks, 1 tank on Zorn, 1 tank on Toth, and you should tank these to the left and right of the arena as you face it. The rest of your raid should then pass by and locate themselves in the middle, a little bit past the line between the 2 bosses. Now, one thing to mention in this fight is that every now and again in the fight, Toth will warp to Zorn. When this happens, your tanks must switch targets. So here you see it now, or about to happen. Toth jumps to Zorn. Then what needs to happen is whoever was tanking Toth tanks Zorn and taunts him, and whoever was tanking Zorn then taunts Toth. We muck it up here. What happens is, I mistaunt the wrong target, therefore Dresden has to AoE taunt to get them on him, and the bosses then buff each other because they're within close range. This increases raid-wide AoE damage and single target damage. Don't panic too much, pop a few cooldowns, pop a few med packs and get a taunt on if this happens. It does happen at times, but getting this transition smooth really helps your healers out in terms of power and keeps your raid health high. Another thing to note in this fight is it's not melee friendly at all, unfortunately. You'll notice SWTOR, who is the only melee DPS in this fight, really does get a battering whenever he's in close range to targets due to local damage. Anyway, back to the tanking. So you have to swap tanks every time Toth warps to Zorn, and this will happen frequently during the fight. It happens again here. A quick call out and then a taunt on the new target, and that sorts everything out. If it gets into the middle of the raid like it does there, it does quite heavy damage. The reason this happened to us is due to the camera angle, so make sure whoever's tanking Toth shouts when he jumps, because you may not be able to see the jump through Zorn. So it's all about communication between your 2 tanks in that case. The reason for the tank switching is because whichever target you're tanking will give you a debuff. If you have that debuff and are still tanking that target, you will take increased damage. We've also heard if you are a DPS and have the debuff, you will then cause reduced damage on the boss. So for that reason, DPS will also have to change targets. The way we managed this was 2 DPS were assigned to each tank, and when the tank switched targets, the DPS also switched targets. This also enables quite accurate DPS balancing on the 2 bosses. You'll also notice that our tanks both tank with their backs to the wall. The reason for this is because there's frequent knockbacks from the boss on the tanks, and that can cause the healers a lot of issues in terms of having to move and interrupting the heals. The more static you can keep your team, the better AoE heals you can put up, and the higher your power pool is going to be without interruption. So that's the tanking aspect of it. DPS, you just need to stay stacked in the middle if you're ranged with your healers. Well, I say stacked, but have a little bit of spread because there is splash damage going on throughout the fight, so please keep an eye on that. There's a lot of raid-wide damage, so staying together and being able to use AoE heals really does help your healers a lot. Your tanks, you will get low on health, as you see here. If you get low on health, try to save a cooldown for it. If you notice your entire raid are low on health, pop a cooldown, tell your healers you've got a cooldown on, and to heal up the raid, then heal you. It is really about communication between the tanks and the healers, and then just maintaining constant DPS, because there's a lot of damage coming out in this fight, and it can be quite spiky. Other than that, make sure that the bosses never face the raid. If they do, they seem to do quite heavy frontal damage, which can cause wipes. There's certain times where, for example here, Toth will just start pounding on the ground at one person. When this happens, he's untauntable, so keeping aggro as a tank is essential here. Other than that, there's one other mechanic to mention, and that is that during the fight, red circles will appear around the room. These red circles then have basically a spike mechanic come out of them, causing damage to anyone within the red circle. If you see them, get out of them. The main pain here is your healers are going to have heals interrupted, so just be aware health may get low at this point. Longer this fight goes on, the tougher it gets, so the main thing is keep DPS high. The faster you get them down, the higher your health's going to be throughout the fight. Now, we believe you have to take both targets out at a similar time, because we've heard if not the other one can enrage. We can't confirm that, but we would advise bringing them both down at a similar rate. Once both of their health pools are on 0, they'll drop dead obviously, and a third target will then spawn. Don't worry about the third target, it's a no-brainer if you've got 8 people up. You can probably do it with 4 people if you've got a tank and a healer in those 4 people. It does medium sort of damage, most of its abilities are interruptible, and it's just a case of DPSing it down. It has very low health. If you've got 8 up, it's going to be a win. If you've got 3 or 4 up, you're going to have to think a bit, but make sure you do keep your entire raid up where possible after Zorn Toth. Take this out, then you get your loot. Hopefully in the next video we'll be back with voice comms again, but we didn't feel the voice comms were that effective for the video in this case. Anyway, we hope this helps you. Best of luck in 1.2, and please enjoy it because the bosses do look quite fun.